Good day everyone, I am Michael, moderator for this webinar. I welcome everyone for today's webinar, which is Fair Housing for Disabled. I would now like to introduce our presenter for today, Paul Flogstad. Paul has been involved in the real estate industry for the past 38 years. Now I would like to hand over the floor to the speaker. Over to you, Paul.
Very good. Thank you, Michael, and good afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about fair housing with people with disabilities, and in part of that is the importance of reasonable accommodation, and that's the prime topic that we're going to be talking about. Now, first we need to review a little bit of the basic fair housing and some of the protected classes. Now, there's 7 federal protected classes, and these are race, color, national origin, familial status or families with children, religion, sex, and disability. Now, there's additional protected classes that are not federal. Now, what's the incidence of discrimination every year? Now, what are the breaking down the protected classes? The first one is race. And that's pretty self-explanatory. It's Asian or African American or black or white or American Indian. An example would be requesting an African American applicant to provide 5 years worth of landlord history. Race was the second highest protected status under which discriminations were filed with HUD. So the second protected class is color. And this has to do with pigmentation of the skin, not to be confused with race. The next one, protected class, is national origin. This has to do with ancestry or the accent or the birthplace or the culture that people have, or with limited English speaking. And that's a very common issue. You've got examples of discrimination, protected class, family with children or familial status. This is dealing with children under the age of 18, and there's discrimination prohibits discrimination against families with children under the age of 18. Religion is another protected class. Any overt discrimination against members of any particular religion. The next protected class is sex, and this has to do with sexual harassment, gender stereotyping, discriminatory pricing because of pregnancy or because they're a woman. Now, sexual harassment is unwelcome conduct in a sexual nature which creates an offensive, hostile, or intimidating environment. Now, the last one is disability, protected class, and this means a mental or physical impairment that substantially limits at least one major life activity. What are some of the major life activities? Some of the common examples would be autism or muscular dystrophy or cancer, heart disease, diabetes. Now, you need to remember that not all disabilities are visible. There are physical and mental impairments. Now, disability had the highest percentage of total complaints to HUD for the protected class. So that was the number one on the hit parade, I guess you'd want to say. Fair housing laws require providers to make reasonable accommodations to their rules, policies, practices, or services to give a person with a disability an equal opportunity to use and enjoy the dwelling. Under federal housing and anti-discrimination laws, a reasonable accommodation is a change in those rules or policies or practices. You can also request a reasonable modification. This is the structural or physical change in the unit or building. Can anyone require this? No, you have to have a disability. That's the key ticket that you have to have. Now, what is reasonable? The action requested by the person with a disability does not cause an undue financial burden on the landlord. In requesting an accommodation, the individual has disclosed that he or she has a disability, and if that disability is not apparent, then you as a landlord can ask for verification. You have to have a disability, and a landlord would not have to release you from your lease just because you are disabled. To make a request, the resident has to meet the definition of disability. In May of 2020, the owners and managers of a Pennsylvania community agreed to pay $80,000 to resolve a HUD complaint for discrimination. Under the Fair Housing Act, it's unlawful to exclude or otherwise discriminate against people because they are or someone associated with them has a disability. And it can be physical or mental, and the HUD regulations broadly determine physical or mental impairment to include any psychological disorder or condition. Fair Housing Act protects individuals who do not now have or may never have a physical or mental illness that substantially limits a major life activity. The Fair Housing Act includes special provisions to shield individuals with disabilities from housing discrimination. Example, not all persons with disabilities will have the need to request a reasonable accommodation according to HUD. Now, some do's and don'ts. Don't assume that you must treat everyone the same regardless of disability. Follow standard procedures according to the accommodation request. Don't ignore informal comments, disability-related needs or wants. Don't deny a request simply because the impairment is not apparent. Follow the rules to verify a disability. Do evaluate when the request is necessary when evaluating this request. Don't reject requests without considering alternatives. Don't assess extra fees or insist on additional requirements. You cannot charge an extra deposit or anything of that type for a reasonable accommodation. It's unlawful to require individuals with disabilities to pay extra fees or deposits. Watch how you treat residents after they've made a reasonable accommodation request. Verification should be sought only if the disability or the disability-related need for the requested accommodation is not readily observable. Is this person disabled? Does the person need an accommodation because of that disability, and what is needed? They have online prescriptions or certifications or registrations. There is no official registry of assistance animals. Under fair housing assistance animals, what animals can you have? They're subject to the usual customary pet rules. You cannot pose a direct threat. You cannot charge them pet rent, any kind of deposits or pet-related need. Owners of assistance animals should not be charged pet deposits, and general cleaning or damage deposits can be charged. Now, on our requests, of course, we have a verification from a knowledgeable source. Now, in the past and still use, doctors can write it on a prescription pad. The medical professionals can say this person's in need of a cat or a dog or whatever it would be. So we developed what's called a companion animal request form. Authorization is at the top of the form, and it's sent to the doctor or physician or therapist, and it's returned to you as the manager of your complex. Second page of the form shows the definition of disability. This is the HUD's definition and Fair Housing's definition of disability. But the best part of the form is the penalty clause. Now, I also need to talk a little bit about policies. HUD is getting very, very strict on policies that you have to have. I think we've covered a lot of the fair housing for the person with disabilities. Again, the reasonable accommodation is just a primary situation with folks with disabilities. So you follow the procedures for reasonable accommodations, and it will work out well for you. And I think we covered pretty much all of the scenarios that could possibly come up. I thank you for attending. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So that does conclude the session for today. Thank you everyone for participating. You may all disconnect now. Have a great day.
Thank you much.